All right, so this is I am Justice Williams, and I'm gonna be presenting to you today's game of today, between Nino Batat Bat Batsiahvili, which sounds fire. I know I mispronounced it, but it is what it is. Versus Bilel, and I'm not gonna pronounce that. Very strong player, probably from France. Looks very French. Um, and this is coming from the seventh round of the Battle of the Sexes, right? And so White started off with D4, Black responded with Knight of 6, C4, E6, Knight C3, and Bishop B4. And now we get the Nimzo Indian, which is one of my personal favorite openings. And it's a very solid defense. And it's a good way for Black to be able to play for a win as well. And so after Knight F3, he plays Bishop takes Knight, Pawn takes Knight. And usually when Black plays this, they're indicating that they want to leave White with these double pawns and a nice structural weakness here, and they're going to try to attack it with their queen side pieces. So, for example, this would look like C5. Let's say White decides to play very soft. White in the game played the move E4, but let's say they decide to play softer than that, and Bishop D3, and we can start with moves like this. And maybe this is not the correct order, but this is usually how Black is, conducting this position here. And then they're going to follow it up. Let's just continue with some more soft moves. So like Rook C8, and now we see that there's two pieces, right? We got the Knight, we also got the Bishop here, attacking the C4 pawn. But now we have the Rook also indirectly attacking the C4 pawn. Maybe we could play Queen C7, and then at the right moment, play pawn takes C4 and put not only just put pressure on C4, but eventually be able to win the C4 pawn. So that's usually how Black decides to play after taking on C3. But instead, he plays Knight D2, and he doesn't play C5. He instead plays the move castle, which is pretty normal. So castles, and White plays E4. So in exchange for these double pawns and these long-term weaknesses, White is going to be able to get a very strong center, and possibly an attack from that center. And White does do something sort of like this later on in the game. So after E4, E5. And E5 just puts a halt on White just trying to dominate the center and puts some stake in the center as well. And White plays Bishop D3, right? Not really declaring anything in the center, right? They could have possibly played D5, but that's just playing into Black's hands, right? Because now you don't have any flexibility with these C pawns here, and they can be a long-term weakness later on, right? So they could just play Knight D2, Knight C5, and Black can play around that C pawn and maybe just focus their play mainly on the king side here. So White loses a lot of mobility with moves like D5 or pawn takes E5 and things like that. So White decides to not commit in the center and instead play Bishop D3. And so after Bishop D3, Rook E8 was played, castles. Now Knight D7. I would have thought the Knight usually goes to C6 here, right? Just to continue to follow the plan of Knight A5 and B6 and Bishop A6 like we saw earlier. But Black is doing something different. So Black plays Knight D7. And so after Knight D7, the move Rook E1, and now Knight F8. And this is one of the reasons why I like the Nimzo Indian so much, is because you get to maneuver at your pace. And so now the Knight is going to the king side first, because like we said, like White gets a strong center, which may lead to an attack. So why not stop White's attack first before we even try to attack these C pawns, which is what Black is trying to argue here. And so after Knight F8, Knight F1 is played, B6 is now played, right? Opening up the Bishop A6 idea. Knight G6, excuse me, Knight G3, now Knight G6, Knight G3, Knight G6, and now Knight F5, right? Knight F5. And Black plays H6. So Black has the opportunity to take on F5, which does give White another pair of double pawns, but these double pawns aren't really so harmful here. Let's say we go back to f8, because if we go to e7, we lose the e5 pawn. So let's say we go back to f8. Well, all white has to do is just continue to open up the game or leave the game sort of open. Maybe a move like queen f3 makes a lot of sense. Bishop g5 comes later, but more importantly, white is just going to be able to play moves like g4 and h4. So let's say we play knight 7, moves like g4 come in. Right now, g5 is threatened, and it wins the knight here. So let's say we play h6, h4 can happen. And now it's just very hard for white to be able to stop, or black to be able to stop this attack. Maybe e4 is possible here, but not really. Actually, e4 shouldn't be possible here. It just takes, and you might think you get your pawn back, but your rook is hanging, right? So that doesn't work here for black either. So if black isn't able to, solve their problems with tactical means here, then this position is definitely just in white's favor. So h6 was played instead. After h6, g3 was played, stopping the knight from infiltrating with moves like knight f4. And black plays the move knight e7, right? Because after knight e7, he's offering a trade. He doesn't want to play bishop takes f5, but he's definitely willing to play knight takes f5. And he's offering and allowing white to play knight takes e7, because the more pieces that get traded, the closer we get to an endgame. And the closer we get to an endgame, the more these c pawns become weaknesses, right? Right now, it's not really a weakness because it can't really be attacked too well, but with less pieces on the board, it can't be defended too well either. So after 97, 93, and after 93, let's see, 93, knight c6. Right now, putting pressure on d4, but white still does not commit to playing d5, and instead plays bishop b2, bishop b2. Now he goes to a5. So now black is coming back to the original plan of playing against the c4 pawn. But here, I don't think it's going to work out too well, right? For the main reason because white already has their center set up, and more importantly, white has a lot of resources to defend the c4 pawn. Usually, white shouldn't be able to mobilize the defense to the c4 pawn so quickly, but since white has that here, black's main plan here of knight a5, bishop a6, even though it should be played, it's not really going to do too much damage. So after queen e2, c6, rook a d1, and now queen d7 is pretty suspect, because now once your opponent played rook a d1, their rook is lined up to your queen, but you didn't move the queen out the way. So that allows this thematic break c5. And after c5 comes, right, white is opening up the position. And actually, white should be losing a pawn here if white usually wants to play c5. But here, because you didn't move the queen out the way, white is not losing a pawn. So c5 has to be played because it's the best move in the position. So bishop takes d3, rook takes d3, pawn takes d4, pawn takes d4, and now d5. Now d5 makes a lot of sense here. It may seem awkward, but it makes a lot of sense here because it keeps the game closed. And if you see the minor pieces here, right, black has two knights to white's knight and bishop. So keeping the game closed is probably in black's best favor because of the minor pieces, but also just to stop the attack, or the attack here. So after d5, white played e5, knight h7, and then f4. Right, so white has a very strong center. Most of white's pawns are on the dark squares, which is not really good for the bishop, but nonetheless, white's center should definitely compensate for that. And so black decides to play knight c4, and white plays this very soft move knight g2, right? And after knight c4, probably your best bet is to probably take on c4 takes and then rook e3. So c4 is being attacked. So let's say we just defended with a move like queen d5. Well, now moves like f5 can be played here, and white center is just impossible to attack here. Maybe you win a pawn here, so maybe this is not the best choice, but something will happen in the future. So let's try to defend it. Maybe, no, we can't play bishop a3. So let's just take, and play move like a3. And now f5 is going to come soon, and then f5 e6 or f5 f6. f5 f6 is probably more deadlier. And while black isn't losing for sure, I would rather be on the white side of this for sure. So after knight g2, this allows black to get back in the game with tactical means here. Psych, I lied, because white played bishop c3 first. White played the move bishop c3 first. And so after bishop c3, now f5 is played. And now knight g2 is super duper soft. Now it just makes the most sense to, if you got to do something with the knight, now you got to take it. Now you got to take it. Takes, and play this position. And at least maybe it's not winning for white, and maybe that's why white didn't want to go for this position, but it's definitely black's white's best option here. Maybe because you can, continue to attack with moves like g4. These thematic kind of moves here are still open. But once white is able to, or black is able to get this next move, knight of 6, then it becomes a problem, right? Because now your bishop is out of play, right? We just said that all of white's pawns, or most of white's pawns, 6 out of white's 7 pawns are on dark squares, which smells trouble for this bishop, this dark square bishop. So we got an outpost on c4, and now we're going to bring another knight to another outpost on e4, right? So white decides to play knight h4, and the knight jumps to e4, and now we got 2 strong knights with outposts, and black is doing fine here. Interestingly enough, the computer still says it's about equal, but I definitely can see how white can start to get nervous, and white should be nervous here. White played the move queen g6, right? Not really smelling the urgency in the position, right? In this position, white needs to play a move here. White needs to find this move here because white is in trouble. White is in trouble here, and the position is going downhill, right? So white needs to play the move g4 here. White needs to play the move g4 here, right? Black has to take on g4, and then f5 comes. So you're going to get your g pawn back, but you have the center here, and you have a protected pass pawn now in the e pawn, right? So let's say if after f5, let's say knight takes c3 was played, rook takes c3, and pawn takes c5, right? So right now white is down 2 pawns, but we're gonna get a pawn back. Let's say we get this pawn back here, takes here, and queen takes here. Like we said, white has this protected pass pawn in e6, but more importantly, white's going to be able to bring the queen back to g4, bring a rook to g1, maybe play king h1, other rook to g1, be able to triple up on the g file. The knight is already on the king side, pawn possibility to go to f6, pawn possibility to go to e6, right? So this is what white needed to have played here, and then white continues to play and play for an advantage here, and probably already has the advantage here, but instead plays queen g6, and after queen e8, black is doing fine here. If black is able to trade queens here, then black will be fine. But she finds it too late. She plays g4 now, but now it's a little too late because black has this very nice resource, because black is able to smell the urgency here. Takes on g4 now, sacrificing the exchange, right? Takes, and now we notice, even though white is up in exchange, it's very hard to make like really good moves here for white. I believe maybe rook f1 probably should be played here. I understand why it wasn't played here. But these knights on these outposts are a lot stronger than either one of white's rooks here, especially since there aren't too many open files. There are no open files in this position here for white, right? So that means these rooks aren't at their full potential at the moment. So after rook takes f8, c takes b6, pawn takes b6, bishop b4, take the pawn. So now black has 2 pawns for the exchange. Rook takes f4, e6, rook f6, e7, and rook e6. right? So you might think like, why would we force our opponent to continue to push their pass pawn? But because we're able to stop it very easily, right? If the rook goes to f1, what ended up being played here? 36, e7. Black played king f7 instead, which is cool. Another way to stop it. And then rook f1 was played, and h5. So black is not afraid of trading rooks here because the knights are still more powerful, and the fact that we got 2 pawns with the possibility of getting this third e7 pawn if we're able to get this bishop or block this diagonal with a move like c5 at some point, right? We're going to get another pawn here. So black is doing very well and doesn't mind the traded rooks here. So after h5, a4 was played, right? Trying to play a5 so that c5 can't really be played as well. Rook takes f6 and she takes, whoa, a4, h4. And now rook takes f6, she takes f6, undoubling the pawns and creating a pass pawn here. And so after g takes f6, rook d1, f5, rook f1, knight e3, rook f4, h3. Right, when you got pawns, you need to push them. Or in endgame, when you got passed pawns, you need to push them. These aren't passed, but it is restricting white's king and just giving more squares for and more outposts for black's knights here in the future. So h3, bishop a3 now. Bishop a3 now. King e8. Just taking his time here, playing slowly, not really rushing to play moves like knight c3, even though I want to play moves like knight c3 here. Not really rushing to play moves like knight c3 here. And so after king e8, bishop c1, now knight c2, threatening to win another pawn and try to get in here. Also, when the bishop goes to c1, it also allows for king takes e7, which mentioned earlier, right? If we're able to get that e7 pawn, black is just playing freely here in this position. So after knight c2, bishop b2, knight e1, rook takes f5, knight f3. Sorry, excuse me, king takes e7 first. King takes e7, king f1, and now the knights are just wreaking havoc because white has no threats here. White can't create any pressure here, and black has all the pressure here. Black has the pawn advantage. More importantly, they have a pawn on h3 that's 2 squares away from queening. So if we're able to get this h2 pawn, it's probably is pretty much game over here. So after king f1, knight f3, rook h5, knight takes h2, king e2, and then knight g3 ends the game, winning the rook here. Right. So this was an interesting game. Right. It was a little back and forth. Right. White got the better of the opening. Right. White was able to create some pressure in the center, but also be able to defend their c4 pawn, which usually is a weakness here in these double pawn positions here. And black was pretty much playing aimlessly for a while until white decided to play e5, f4, and after knight c4, right, this is when white started to go awry here, right? So leaving the knight on c4 is probably not to white's advantage. And after f5, when you play a move like knight g2, you're just allowing black to get back into the game. And after this, black did not look back, right? And after and g4 is missed, right? You're not giving yourself a chance to fight in this game here, right? It's going to cost a pawn for a while, but it's necessary to be able to keep the initiative here in this position for white. But after this, right, black was able to sacrifice the exchange, and after that, did not look back and use their pawn advantage and their strong knight outpost to their advantage, and that was pretty much the game here. So that was today's game of the day. Nice exchange sacrifice to cap off the game here. Tune in tomorrow for tomorrow's game of today.